Well, morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining this session. This is the second NASCEE session that's being led by the Turning Point Chartered Accountants organization. We had a really interesting session last week, and then this is the follow-up. So this is number 2 out of 6 in the series. And yeah, we're very grateful to Riza and Farida from Turning Point for stepping up and supporting NASCEE's members with what's often seen as the stuff behind the scenes, but we actually can't operate as organizations in our sector if we don't have strong governance and compliance in place. So the stuff is golden and is foundational for all our organizations. So really interested in the session, which is going to be led by Riza. We're looking at cloud accounting and tech for your NPO. So yeah, hopefully Riza is going to give us a couple of nuggets. Riza is going to be leading the session this week. And then I think Riza and Sandy will give a quick shout out to what's happening in the follow-up sessions, just so you can make sure that you've got those diarized and either yourself or someone relevant in your organization can attend the next 4 sessions. Yeah, so I think from NASCEE, my name's, sorry, I didn't even introduce myself. My name's Giles Gillette. I'm a board member at NASCEE. I'm the treasurer, and I run an organization called New Leaders Foundation. Our primary work is with the Department of Basic Education, and we support them in how data is collected, visualized, and used to drive better interventions into schools. We run a flagship our flagship program is called the Data Driven Districts Program. Some of you might have come across it. So that's New Leaders Foundation and what I do, and then I'm involved with NASCEE as well. I think, Sandy, maybe it's also good to give a little bit of a marketing spiel on the conference, NASCEE's conference, which is coming up in October. So yeah, please look out for that. That's going to be really good. But fabulous to have NASCEE members here and getting insight on the compliance and governance components of your organizations. So Riza, I'm going to hand over to you. Thanks very much again, and I hope this is a really good and informative session. I'm sure it will be. Thanks, everyone, and enjoy the session. Thanks, Sandy.
Thank you very much, Giles. Really appreciate the introduction and obviously the opportunity, to NASCEE for us to actually add value to the nonprofit sector, through the series of capacity building initiatives. So firstly, very warm welcome to all of you. I know it's not ideal to be sitting behind a laptop after just over 1.5 years of Zoom meetings and virtual meetings, especially as we're all accustomed to the soft touch of face-to-face meetings. In fact, me personally as well, still prefer doing it the old way. And usually when we have these workshops and training, you're obviously presenting countrywide, and I'm someone who's quite accustomed to actually walking as I speak. I mean, even when I'm on my cell phone. So it's a bit difficult for me to obviously be standing and presenting to you this morning. But having said that, what we will try and do is we will try and make it as interactive as possible. I have my colleague Farida Lavangi, who's actually on here with me. Oh, sorry, by the way, I actually didn't introduce myself as well. Well, my name is Riza Amra, for those of you that haven't met me. I'm actually one of the partners at Turning Point Chartered Accountants. I've been working now in the nonprofit sector for about 11 years. So we've basically seen it all in the sector. And as I was saying, we've got a colleague of mine who'll be on. What she will do is she'll collate questions that are posted in the chat. But I'm quite happy to engage with anybody that, as we go along. Perhaps what we will do is we will maybe at each section field questions as well. So those of you that want to do it in that way, I'm quite comfortable doing so. And the rest of the guys that have put up questions on the chat, perhaps what we'll do is we'll obviously handle that at the end of the session itself. So yeah, obviously, today's session is something that I'm quite passionate about. We've gone with the play on the word empower as empower in terms of the nonprofit sector. Obviously, these capacity building programs, the objective is to empower nonprofit organizations through obviously knowledge sharing, and these initiatives. But at the same time, I think technology can catapult the nonprofit sector to perhaps another level in terms of, embracing change as well. For me personally, as I mentioned, I'm quite passionate about the subject matter itself. And I'm also on this journey of obviously embracing change, and getting better at it, understanding what's out there for us. It hasn't actually always been the case. And I'll just maybe rewind many years ago, perhaps in the 80s, growing up, my mom used to actually sell computers to doctors, and she'd sell, not in the major centers, so she'd travel quite a bit. And we had one of these IBM or chunky IBM desktops at home. I'm not sure how many of you might still recall the floppy disks as well, with I think the green screen and no real color on the screen. So I used to obviously be playing around a lot with those computers. But then there was a huge gap, from the 80s, me then going into primary school, having gone to a public school without a computer lab at school. I never saw a computer right up until perhaps university. So there was like a gap of probably about 12 years, when I first sort of worked on a computer, and then, when I was sort of forced to thereafter. And the amazing thing was sitting there in a LAN all those years later, from obviously the old, I think, MS-DOS to now having Windows software and things like that with color on a screen. And I remember having to do an application form for articles online. So fortunately, my friends were with me, helping me out to get logged in to the computer. But obviously, being so slow on it, it took me much longer to actually get started. And I was obviously going ahead with the application form. Little did I realize that I needed support in terms of actually trying to type onto the next line. Something as simple as that was beyond me. I mean, I didn't know that, which key to use to go onto the next line, or even if you moved your mouse around and clicked on that specific field box, you'd be able to type in there. And lo and behold, I was left all alone because my mates decided to go and watch a fashion show. So the best I could do was to send an SMS to someone to ask them how to go about typing onto the next line, because as a student, I didn't have airtime at that time, So, having said that, for those people that are reluctant to change and are hesitant to obviously embrace new technology, all is not lost. And I think those in the firm will vouch that, I'm actually someone who's quite passionate and like to drive technology now. Always looking at new things that we could bring in as well for our firm and for our clients as well. Because ultimately it's all about improving processes. You want to automate mundane tasks as well, add value, and I think most of all, make efficient use of your time. Someone with 4 kids, I think that time is obviously extremely valuable as well. So yeah, I think that's where, it comes from in terms of a bit of background, in terms of, where and how and why we're on this journey as well. Because I really do believe that, cloud technology can definitely assist not only the nonprofit sector, but just businesses as a whole. So yeah, in terms of obviously what we will be covering for today, just a high level overview. Obviously we'll chat about a little bit about what we do as a firm, for those of you that haven't worked with us, as TPC as a firm itself, and what we do in the nonprofit sector. And we'll go into some of the benefits of the cloud itself. We'll then go through a snapshot of some of the tools that we use as a firm, and some of them that you can use as well, that will assist your nonprofit organization. So it's not limited to accounting only. It goes into project management as well, HR, payroll, and the like. What we will then do is we will cover a few of those solutions, the ones that we felt would be most relevant. Obviously, because of time, we haven't been able to cover all in detail. And, in no way am I an expert on each of these tools. I've got obviously experience in some of them, whilst on the accounting front, we do have zero certification as well. So it would be best that we obviously just, go through a few of them. And I'm quite happy for, those, on the platform today to perhaps even share, some of the tools that they've used, which we could look at and share with the rest of, those attending today as well. We'll then end up with obviously some of the tailored solutions that we offer nonprofit organizations, and then a question and answer session right at the end, hopefully with a cup of coffee virtually. Yeah, so as a firm, we actually specialize in the nonprofit sector. The firm has been around now for about 20 years. As I mentioned, personally, I've been involved with nonprofit organizations for 11 years now. And what you do realize is that, the sector itself, it actually does require specialist skills and knowledge. And unfortunately, in the South African marketplace, there's very few professional advisors that actually, focus on the nonprofit sector. I'm not sure why. Perhaps it's because it's looked at as the third sector behind, obviously, the public and the corporate sector, or the private sector rather. And obviously then the nonprofit sector is always at the back of the queue. But with us as a firm, we've made that our primary objective. It is our primary market in terms of, us servicing the sector itself. We've got the technical expertise and know-how to actually assist nonprofit organizations on a range of issues. As I mentioned, I'm one of the partners. We've got 3 chartered accountants at the director level as well. At a manager level, we've got someone who, can register as a chartered accountant as well. So we do focus on the technical aspects. Farida, who's on here today, as I mentioned, she heads up the audit division. She used to lecture at one of South Africa's leading universities as well, having served as a senior manager with one of the big 4 audit firms. Likewise, the head of our tax department as well, served in a senior managerial capacity at 2 of the big 4 firms as well, and is a tax specialist, having served on, or is still currently serving on SAICA's Eastern Regions Tax Committee as well. So we focus a lot on the technical aspects, whether it's tax law, whether it's compliance, we always go down to the nuts and bolts of the law itself to be able to offer you as the nonprofit organization or as our client with obviously the correct advice as well. If you look at our track record, in the sector, we've worked with some of South Africa's leading, or we still work with some of South Africa's leading nonprofit organizations like CAPRISA, the AIDS Foundation of South Africa, the South African National AIDS Council, and the list is quite lengthy in terms of the nonprofit organizations that we actually support. And in terms of projects across the board, whether it's audit, whether it's tax advisory, whether it's just setting up the legal structure, or even your monthly accounting and payroll services. So we are obviously the trusted advisors to funders as well, and nonprofit organizations across the spectrum. It's not only your large, well-established, it's even your smaller CBOs as well. An organization that's starting off, and is on a journey to actually, enter the sphere of obviously servicing humanity at the end of the day. And I think that's what nonprofit organizations are known for. So yeah, that's just a bit about us as a firm itself. Just moving on, I found this quite apt, in terms of tying it into technology as well. We all have limited time, on the face of this earth. We definitely, it's not an unlimited resource, and I can assure you it's more valuable than the latest cryptocurrency, whether it's Bitcoin or the next flavor of the month in terms of the stock market or anything of that sort. But it's our time that's the most valuable resource that any of us has as individuals. And I think this is what technology brings. It actually allows us to use our time more valuably. It allows us to focus on the things that mean the most to us. And whether it's family, whether it's serving a specific cause, that's what the cloud and that's what technology actually allows. And I think that's something that's sort of driven the processes and the change within our firm as well. We're quite big as a firm in terms of, having a work-life balance. We'd like to think that we're relatively young, and all of us obviously have young families at the firm as well. So it is quite important to have that mix, and be able to obviously work in a highly pressurized environment, but to be able to then switch off and spend that time, with those people that you care for as well. And I'm sure it's the same with you in the nonprofit sector, especially when you're wearing multiple caps. There's sometimes, not enough time in the day. I know, someone said to me once that the older you get, the faster time goes by. And it seems to be quite true, because, as we grow older, it seems like every year time seems to be passing us by much, much faster, and you can't really account for it. So, if we are reluctant to embrace change, then this should be a motivation in terms of freeing up, your time, which is that valuable resource, to be able to focus our time on energy on things that matter the most. And this is what the cloud obviously brings to us. So yeah, in terms of the cloud itself, the benefits, are definitely significant. I know there's many people that are reluctant. I mean, we've had that journey ourselves. We've asked questions. We still have staff who are reluctant to make the change as well. But undoubtedly, there's definitely benefit in it. One of them being cost savings. In terms of how we used to do things previously, whether it's in terms of a software itself or tools that we'd like to use, within our organizations, generally it comes at a price, and it's undoubtedly that it does definitely cost. However, with the cloud, it actually tends to be much cheaper. If you look at the cost, not just the direct cost of perhaps a certain program or a certain tool, but also the indirect costs of, again, freeing up your time and resources to be able to do other things. So there's definitely a cost in that as well, as opposed to just merely a financial cost. And I think that's what the cloud allows us to do. It obviously allows us to collaborate effectively. When I say collaborate, I'm quite big on collaboration as opposed to merely just communication. I know, going through articles and, qualifying as a chartered accountant, it's always been drummed in terms of how important it is to communicate. And in all aspects of our lives, whether it's in our personal lives with our spouses or with our families, communication is quite critical. But for me, I take it a step further and go into collaboration today. And this is, again, something that the cloud allows us to do quite easily with the various platforms that are available to us. Right. Disaster recovery. I'm sure at some point, all of you have forgotten to hit Control S or save an Excel document that you would have worked on for an hour, or had a laptop that has crashed when you haven't done a backup for the past couple of months. I know I've been guilty of it at a certain point, but I've learned the hard way. And with the cloud, there's no need for you to manually have to back up any longer, for instance. It is always available. So even if your laptop has to crash and you didn't do a backup, all you need to do is, if you are working on the cloud, whether it's on a program like Xero or even if it's Office 365, is log in on your tablet, log in on your mobile or on someone else's PC as well, and you're good to go. So obviously, it helps in terms of disaster recovery and backups, because no matter, how fancy the technology is that we've got in terms of a manual process, or even if you've got the IT guys that have set up routine backups, there's always a chance that something's going to go wrong, and generally it does, in terms of those backups and things like that. So yeah, I think that's the great thing for me. It's something that I really enjoy, of not having to then worry about making sure that my information is on an external hard drive, or on a server somewhere as well, just knowing that I can work and access it at any point if something had to happen. So mobility and flexibility. I mean, I think in terms of, obviously, all of us working remotely in the past 1.5 years, I don't think we would have really envisaged this to be the case for so long. But working on the cloud allows for that. It gives us the flexibility to be able to collaborate and obviously work remotely, without even actually having to go in and invest significant amounts of monies to actually, bring in this technology to allow for that, because of the platforms that are available. Furthermore, you can work across devices. So for instance, you might have a PC out in the office and you have a laptop that you work with, when you're on the road, or your tablet, or even your mobile phone. That's the great thing, is that, any information that's sitting on any of these devices, if it's on the cloud, it becomes available to you across your devices without having you to really sync that data or anything of that sort. And I think it gives us the flexibility to obviously work how we want to, whether you prefer working at a coffee shop or like us Durbanites sitting on the beach, and getting work done. With me, it's slightly different. I'm very impatient by nature, so I don't do well, sitting in lines and waiting in long queues. So obviously, typically at government departments, obviously pre-COVID, I generally take my laptop with me, whether I'm waiting for my driver's license or passport, or even if I'm just sitting in at SARS, just to make sure that you're not wasting that time. Fortunately now, I don't necessarily even have to take my laptop with, can do a lot from my cell phone or even a tablet as well. So it makes it much, much easier in that way. And automatic updates, we've all been through it at a certain point where Windows is doing an update and you can't really do much on your computer or your PC, and there's really nothing that can be done during that time. So it's time wasted. Likewise, I know we've had an issue recently where, and it comes down to even leading service providers, where, our payroll service provider hadn't updated the latest ETI incentives on their payrolls. And we had to wait for those updates to go through because this is a desktop version of a payroll. But with automatic updates, these updates happens in the background, if it's a cloud-based solution, without you even being aware of it generally. And as soon as you go on, you're good to go. You don't need to load anything on your side for it to update. Like I know recently Xero, it added a new functionality where VAT returns can be filed directly from the software itself. It didn't require me to go and update the program in order to have that functionality available. It automatically is there available to you. And likewise across the platform in terms of the cloud solutions, as changes are being made, the next time you go in, you've got access to it. And I think that's the great thing about it. And then lastly, data security. I think this is a critical part of it. We're all very skeptical. And I mean, to be honest, even as an individual, getting onto the cloud, it took longer than I would have liked. And I think this is probably one of the biggest areas of concern. For me, it was that security. We sort of have a sense of comfort knowing that our information is on our device or on our servers at our offices and things like that. But here, because it's sitting in a cloud, which we don't necessarily have control of, there is obviously that barrier of entry for many people in terms of saying, okay, but how secure is it? If you are working with reputable service providers and using reputable tools, then it is secure. Most of them have, whilst I'm no IT expert, but you obviously do a bit of homework, but generally, the security that they implement is similar to the security that government departments would implement, or banks or insurance companies and things like that. Having said that, obviously, there's always a risk for data breach. That's the reality. We've seen it time and time again. So no system is watertight in any way at all. But there's, I think, sufficient security, and especially, as I said, if it's reputable service providers, that you're working with, then it generally shouldn't be an issue in terms of that security. In fact, it should be actually a lot more secure, on the cloud than even your own servers and things like that. So that's just some of the benefits, obviously, of the cloud. I'm not sure if there's any questions at this stage that someone wants to come in. I'm happy to engage with you at this point in time before we move forward. Oh, good. Okay, so basically this is just a snapshot of some of the tech that we use. We don't necessarily use all of these platforms. We use some of them. Some of them we've just given you alternatives as well. And in no way is this list exclusive, in terms of some of the tech. We've obviously just focused on a few key areas, and I'll perhaps run through, some of them. Some would be well known and some might not be, but I think it would add value to your nonprofit organization as well by looking into some of these tools that are available out there. The great thing about some of these platforms is that many of them have free packages as well. And generally the free packages would suffice depending on obviously the size of your operations and your requirements. And even if a free package doesn't meet your requirements, you generally have some of the guys that would offer packages specific to nonprofit organizations as well, which then have added functionality and features along with discounted rates. So that's the advantage. More often than not, there's a month-to-month cost with a lot of these solutions. And even so, I mean, there's no long-term contracts and things like that. So it becomes quite easy where you go in and do a trial for maybe a month at no charge. And if you want to then sign up, you go for it, test it out within your organization. If it works, you stay on it. If not, you can move on to something else. So that's a great thing about some of the solutions that are available to you. Just something to think about, and I always mention this, to those in the firm as well. And even when I'm meeting, people coming in for interviews and things like that, I know we go through a lot of CVs. We get applications coming in. Obviously, we, as a firm of chartered accountants, we take on article clerks every year as well. So, you're constantly looking at CVs. And the one thing that always stands out for me, and I'm not sure how is it with you guys, but I'm sure, you guys would agree on it, is that you'd probably see the same thing on CVs time and time and again. And that's advanced Excel skills, Microsoft PowerPoint, Word, and that sort of thing. I'm not sure how many of you would have seen some of these solutions on a CV. I can guarantee you that I've never seen many of this at all, probably maybe two at most from here. So that's the advantage of obviously, going onto the cloud and embracing these different platforms, is that not only are you assisting your organization, but even as individuals, we start developing skills that we usually wouldn't have. We're all accustomed to Excel, Word, and all of those things. But beyond that, if we had to be taken out of our comfort zone, not many of us would be able to say, okay, we are quite familiar with these tools. We've got experience in it as well. So it definitely would assist you, in the long term as well, right? Just one other thing, we don't necessarily approve of all of these solutions that are currently available. It's not an endorsement in any way from us as a firm to say that we've actually vetted these platforms. It's just to create awareness, to let you know what's out there for you. Having said that, we are Xero accredited, so that's our preferred accounting solution, and that's the platform that we use for our accounting services that we offer to our clients as well. I just want to touch on a few of them. Obviously with Xero, we will go through in a bit more detail, but just on some of the other solutions that you could use as a nonprofit organization as well. So Simple Pay and PaySpace, they are two of the cloud-based payroll solutions that I'm aware of. We are about to transition over as well ourselves. So we're busy doing a bit of, obviously, a comparison study between the two of them to see, which solution works the best for us between the two, as opposed to relying primarily on, obviously, your desktop payroll solutions. We've got project management tools. We use Asana internally. I think it's fantastic. It's really changed the way I even work as an individual as well. An alternative to Asana is Trello. Basically it's a project management tool and a task manager, which again, it allows collaboration. So not only does it assist you as an individual, but just your teams as well. And then you've got certain CRM solutions, customer relationship management. I'm quite certain, I know with, there's probably certain solutions that are specific to donor management, which you could use as well. But it's worth looking at if you're not on a donor management platform currently. HubSpot and Zoho are two of the solutions that you might want to consider in terms of maintaining those relationships and keeping a track of when last you've obviously communicated to your donor, your communications to them, and setting appointments in terms of getting in touch with your donors and things like that as well. Marketing campaigns and all of it. It's fully integrated even in terms of being able to send out emails directly from the system and things like that without you having to manually type out emails to donors and things. So, it works pretty well, allowing you to maintain those relationships, contact details, and as opposed to having an Excel database of your donors, for instance. You can move over to something like this. You then have access to it on your cell phone as well if you need to get a donor's contact number and need to make a call as well, right? Then I'm not sure how many of you might be familiar with something called Canva. It's actually a platform that already has a ton of marketing material available, which you can tailor according to your needs and your requirements, right from designing of logos to brochures to social media campaigns, whether it's for Facebook or LinkedIn, Instagram. All of those things are on there already. Again, with them, they've got free packages as well as a paid packages. You don't necessarily have to be a graphic designer to be able to use it. It's quite user-friendly as well. And I think as a non-profit organization, if you've got someone who has a flair for designing, you don't have to go and pay thousands of rands to get things designed. So it's a wonderful tool. There's something else which we obviously, as I said, this is not a comprehensive list, which we've used as well. It's called Fiverr. Fiverr. It's an online marketplace of freelancers, and you get freelancers doing a host of things, right from marketing to data capturing to voiceovers as well. And you can go out there and you can basically literally choose expertise from anywhere in the world. You get some of these freelancers that actually even work for some of the biggest companies in the world as well, but also freelance, and offer their services to the general public globally. So that's something worth looking at as well. I'm sure many of you are familiar with MailChimp in terms of a mailing list and obviously sending out, automated emails and marketing campaigns and things like that to your donor base, perhaps. Again, something that's quite easy to use, as opposed to obviously having a manual mailing list as well. The interesting one, which we've started using recently, is a South African solution called Wamly, wamly.io. That's the website. And for me personally, I thought this was fantastic as someone who generally, obviously, goes through, as I mentioned earlier on, a ton of CVs. And some of the time, the problem with CVs is that, especially when you're taking on, a first-year article clerk. Remember, these guys are generally fresh out of university or Technicon, and they don't necessarily have any work experience. So, how much can you really pick up from an individual CV who has no work experience? So the only way to actually get a feel for a person is to actually meet with them, obviously have an interview as well. The problem though is that when you have to work through a number of these, it can become quite time consuming to set up time and things like that, especially where, you're obviously working virtually like we have been recently as well. So what Wamly actually does is that it actually moves that entire process online. So essentially what you can do is you can set up for your candidates predefined questions like you would, in an actual interview. You can set a time limit, in terms of how long the potential employee has to answer those questions. A link gets shared to that individual, and during their own time, they can go in and do a video upload of them answering those questions. Once they're done with it, you're then able to actually review those answers again, at your convenience. The two of you or the three of you, whoever it is, within a firm or within an organization, don't necessarily have to all be sitting around the table at the same time. If you want to be doing it whilst having your lunch, go for it. You can then assess, and you don't necessarily have to go through each question that individual might have answered. You can jump between questions, and just maybe if you want to focus on a specific area, just to get a feel for that individual, you can go in and obviously just focus on that. It's up to you entirely. Thereafter, you can then decide whether you want to go ahead and obviously interview that candidate or even possibly even appoint them as well. So, it's obviously a fairly new solution. But I think it's gaining quite a bit of traction. Some of the big, large listed companies in South Africa are using the solution as well. And again, with them, they do have a free version available for you also on there. So yeah, so that's basically some of the tech that we would encourage you guys to look at. As I mentioned, again, it's not comprehensive. It's just to make you familiar or to make you aware as to what's out there. But I can assure you there's so much more. There's actually so much more out there which doesn't cost an arm and a leg. You can be certain of that. I'm not sure if anybody has any comments at this stage or anything that you feel is worth looking at that we can share with the rest of the participants, perhaps maybe any tools that you are using within your organization, that you would feel that could add value to the sector itself. Okay, we're good to go. Okay, I would hope that nobody is currently using something like this. You'll never believe, but we do have a client that still actually records their accounting transactions manually. He's a very old gentleman, very meticulous in how he does it, but he still does it in this way. Obviously, this would have been an old school trial balance on a general, or you call it a ledger. I don't even know what you call the book any longer, but I remember doing it at school. This is essentially how data used to obviously be captured, many years ago. And if you ask me, if we're still using, data capturing processes which require us to capture from bank statements, then in all honesty, we haven't moved away too much from this. All we've done is that we've taken data capturing from writing it with a pen in a book to using our fingers to type it out onto a computer or to a laptop. That's all we've done. Yes, There might be some subtotaling which doesn't require you to put in a calculator, or your VAT might be calculated automatically. But in terms of the overall concept, it hasn't changed if we're still utilizing PDF bank statements and capturing manually. And this is what we hope to change, in terms of we need to actually move away from this. So accounting hasn't changed much if we haven't embraced the cloud technology and some of the functionality that it brings to our organizations via this. So what we'd like to do now is obviously just go through some of the processes that we feel in terms of what we use as a firm, in terms of our cloud accounting solutions that we offer to nonprofit organizations. Again, this is not something that has to be followed rigidly, but it's just the best practice that we feel works well for us, and it's something to consider in terms of the process flow itself. So we'll just focus on three broad categories, starting off with data extraction, because generally we find that this is obviously an area which can be time consuming. When it comes to data extraction, it's quite a cumbersome process when you've got hordes of bank statements, multiple bank accounts, and you're trying to extract information from there and bring it into your accounting solution, right? So basically, we work with Xero, as I mentioned earlier on, and this is the process flow as it will apply to Xero itself. We will also then, follow this up by a short demonstration of Xero itself and how the functionality works, and just covering it at a very high level. We normally do a separate presentation just on the functionality that Xero could bring to your organization. So anybody that's interested in finding out more about Xero, you're most welcome to send us an email, and we can set up a time during the latter part of next week where we can take you through the full functionality of Xero itself. But obviously, because of time, we're not going to be able to go through everything today. But yeah, so basically how we work is that if we're transitioning over from any accounting solution other than Xero, that process is also automated. We don't need to manually bring in data, even if it's via a manual backup or anything of that sort. We actually use a solution called Cloud Convert, where the data from your previous backups actually gets converted and sucked into Xero already. So all your prior historical data, if you're moving on to a platform like Xero or another cloud-based solution, gets automatically brought in. Obviously, you then appreciate that the likelihood of error is quite slim if you're doing it automatically as well. Once we've brought that in and we've set up an organization on Xero, the next thing after you obviously set up your chart of accounts and agree on how you want to report and how you'd like your reports to look at, is to actually start with the actual process of bringing in the data. I know many nonprofit organizations don't necessarily apply accrual accounting, because of the fact that obviously they basically, whatever income comes in is generally getting spent generally in the same month. It's only at year end when your accruals get brought in. But obviously it's not technically correct. And it would be best practice to actually utilize accrual accounting as well. The problem though is that if you're applying accrual accounting, especially on your supplier invoices and on your expenses, is raising those creditors. It would, as opposed to where you just process a payment that's gone off your bank statement into the accounting records. What this would mean is that it would mean that your creditor has to be raised firstly. So obviously it would mean then an extra leg of capturing and raising a supplier invoice for it to be reflected as a creditor. We use a tool called HubDocs for that. How this works is that it's actually amazing. I mean, you don't even necessarily have to manually capture that invoice. All that happens is that each organization would have a unique email address to which your supplier invoice can be emailed through to. Even if your supplier is not emailing it to you, you could also then scan and upload that into HubDocs as well. So it works either which way. So for many of our organizations, what we do encourage is, especially where you have suppliers or service providers that email you on a monthly basis. So for instance, you could have your invoice from Telkom or Vodacom coming in on a monthly basis. All you need to do is on your email inbox, set up an auto forward to the unique email address. So you don't even need to manually actually forward that email. It goes directly into HubDocs. The amazing thing is that the data from there actually is automatically extracted. So the supplier name the date, the amount, the VAT, it's actually automatically extracted. All you need to then go in and do is approve it. Once it's approved, it actually then sucks that data directly into Xero and raises the creditor for you without you having to manually input anything. Obviously, there's certain instances because of the clarity of documents, you might need to correct a supplier name or whatever the case might be if the document wasn't very clear. But generally, it would be fairly accurate. So I think that's an amazing tool to use to be able to obviously automate part of that process itself, right? Thereafter, many organizations obviously have perhaps multiple sites, or you have staff that are going out and travel. They go out of town, spend a few days away from the office and generally incur expenses on behalf of the organization. Currently, most organizations, what you'd have to do, you'd have to bring the till slips back and put in complete a claims form or a reimbursement, a form that you need to complete. It gets processed into the accounting system, and then you get paid out maybe 30 days later. I'm not sure. Each organization obviously has their own rules. The problem then is that those till slips, we all know how it fades over a period of time. With an application called Xero Expenses, which is available to download on your mobile phone, all the individual needs to do is take a picture of that till slip and submit the claim via their cell phone. That information then gets brought into Xero automatically. The person responsible for obviously approving the expenditure will go onto Xero and approve that claim on there. The amount is already processed. You don't have to do any additional processing at all from your side. Even with this as well, it actually extracts that data from that till slip automatically. So I'm not sure how many organizations on here are VAT registered, for instance. So just to give you an example, as a non-profit organization, for a business like ourselves, we are unable to claim back VAT on entertainment expenditure. But as a non-profit organization, let's just say you've taken one of your donors out for a meal and you need to lodge that claim. You can claim back VAT on entertainment-related costs. By using the Xero app, even the VAT amount is automatically extracted and posted as a VAT receivable as well. So it's amazing in terms of how much and the magic that actually happens through some of these tools that are available to you, right? Then to take it a step further, you have something called automatic bank feeds. As I mentioned earlier on, if you're still processing bank statements from PDF, we really need to move away from that. With automatic bank feeds, you can actually get your processing done in real time. So generally how we would work is for all our clients that we take onto Xero, they have to agree to utilize automatic bank feeds. How that works is that you no longer have to go in and send your accountants CSV or PDF bank statements on a month-to-month basis. That headache is long gone. Neither do we as accountants have to follow up and chase up with our clients. Guys, we've got to get your accounting records up to date, and please do send us your bank statements by the 4th of the month so we can get your records processed by the 7th. We're no longer doing that at all. So even in terms of the communication, and the emails back and forth and information getting lost in between, it takes that entire leg away entirely, right? By using automatic bank feeds, what happens is that when you set up your account on Xero, you input your login details to your bank account in a secure space. Xero then uses what's called Yodlee bank feeds to scrape that data in terms of those transactions that are sitting on your bank account itself. So they have no access to actually transact on their bank account. That's critically important. It's merely viewing those transactions and extracting it, bringing it into Xero. The advantage with something like this is that we no longer have to wait for you to give us the information to get your accounting records up to date. We actually can then do it in real time. We're no longer waiting to do processing at month end. So your accounting records can be up to date as of today. So if you're sitting here this morning, and if you're using automatic bank feeds, your accounting records can be up to date at this point in time. So if you're sitting with a donor, for instance, and he needs to see, okay, what's the income and expenditure on a specific project that you might have incurred, you can actually show him that data without even also having it on your laptop, because you've got access to it on your cell phone as well. So that's the advantage of Xero. It obviously gives you, the organization, access along with your accountants as well, and you're not paying per user. That's the other great thing, you know, unlike certain of the other software where you normally pay per user, right? The other thing with bank feeds and processing now, what happens is that you can actually then create bank rules, which then identify specific transactions, especially your recurring transactions, for it to automatically process those transactions to a specific account. Like I used Telkom earlier on, right? But let's just say you've got a debit order that goes through for insurance or your bank charges, for instance. I mean, that's it's a recurring fee that's incurred. What would happen then is once you set up that bank rule upfront, every single time thereafter that transaction is reflected on your bank account, you no longer have to manually go and take, okay, so you've paid Santam, you no longer have to go and process that to insurance and allocate the VAT or anything of that sort. Everything is done for you automatically already. It's just a matter of you obviously checking that data. So you can imagine through all of this, it obviously frees up so much of your time itself, right? The other advantage is that, you know, if there's a query on a specific transaction, you can do it directly via Xero itself before processing those transactions, right? If an organization still has PDF bank statements, there's a conversion tool called Swiss CFDV, which allows those bank statements to be converted and brought into Xero as well. So, you know, there's various solutions available. We've obviously touched on a few of them in terms of the data extraction process that, you know, one could apply, you know, in terms of your accounting records itself, right? In terms of the reconciliation and review process, it makes obviously your management review so much easier, where you're no longer having to wait for a report to be sent to you either by the accountant or you know, the finance manager. You've got access to it on your side. You can go in and review, you know, at your leisure and approve those management accounts, for instance. Even as I mentioned earlier on, in terms of bank reconciliations, it can be done even on a weekly basis, or if you prefer doing it daily, it can even be done daily as well with automatic bank feeds. For me, the biggest advantage is obviously data storage. Currently, most organizations would have you know, lever arch files with invoices, you know, and then obviously because you have to keep you know, data going back historically as well, most organizations don't have the space, and you eventually have to incur cost with Metrofile, you know, to keep those boxes. With a solution like Xero, your invoices are saved on the cloud, linked to those specific transactions. So if you need to find an invoice that might have been paid for audit fees you know, 2 years ago, all you need to go in is you click or you log into Xero, you find that specific transaction or you search for it quite easily, you drill down and you'll be able to actually pick up that actual invoice as well. So that's the added advantage of obviously using a cloud-based accounting solution. Right. As I mentioned earlier on, real-time reporting, we do know very well the challenges of getting financial statements out on time, especially with obviously donor requirements and management accounts and things like that. But if your accounting is up to date and you're no longer spending time doing you know, manual data capturing, it obviously then allows you to meet your deadlines and get your financial statements out as quickly as possible after year end as well. And as I mentioned earlier on, there's the added functionality which Xero has been introducing, where even something like VAT returns, you know, currently most of us would have your VAT report that would be sitting in whatever your accounting package is. You'd have to obviously run that report. Thereafter, you'd have to log into e-filing, complete that return, monitor it, you know, to see if there's any you know, verification audit from SARS, and then upload that information thereafter after downloading it or even scanning it in. With the solution that Xero has now introduced, and I think that's the advantage again with cloud, is that because of the APIs, they're able to speak on multiple fronts. So in this instance, you can submit your VAT return directly from Xero without having to log into e-filing as well. That's the advantage. That's the beauty of the cloud itself. So whilst, yes, with government departments like SARS, you know, that's one way of it being able to speak to each other. But even with banks eventually, I mean, even if your organization is applying for finance for a vehicle or a property, you know, currently it has to go via yourself to the accountants, then to the bank, and there's a lot of back and forth. Eventually, even the banks would have access to your accounting records to be able to make those decisions in terms of whether to approve that finance in real time. You know, and there are already third-party service providers who are doing so. You know, the service is available here in South Africa. What we'd like to do is perhaps just go through a quick demo of Xero in terms of the actual interface and how it looks. Just give me a second. I'm just going to need to log in. Guys, is there any questions thus far? Any comments? I'm not sure how many of you perhaps are using cloud-based solutions already, but if not, then I think it's seriously something that needs to be considered. It's not a matter of if, it's actually just a matter of time when, every single one of us would eventually be on there. If we're not, then eventually, the software that's being supported by, the current, obviously, solutions that are available will eventually become redundant as well. So it's quite important that you start looking at that in terms of the solutions that are available. So yeah, this is basically the interface of Xero itself. As you can see, it's a pretty simple layout. When you log in, you've got a dashboard that's available to you on your home screen. You can even tailor this dashboard according to your own needs and requirements. You can change your account watch list that you might want to see on here. So for instance, if you want to see your donation income being at the top, you can change it according to your needs itself, right? That's the advantage of it. It can change. It's not rigid in its structure, unlike desktop solutions, which make it a lot more difficult to change and tailor it according to your own needs and requirements. When you go on, as I mentioned, this is the key area in terms of how the solution works itself, in terms of the actual processing. So if you click on there, it obviously drills down to your bank reconciliation, and this is where your processing happens. So for instance, some of you that might have been accustomed to a solution like Pastel, where you'd have your cash book processing, this is essentially the same thing. So I'm just going to go through a few of the examples of some of the things that we've obviously covered thus far. But as I mentioned earlier on, right, what happens here is that this is where all your bank transactions on the right-hand side, on the left-hand side, my apologies, would appear. Right, so these are the transactions that get brought in and sucked in from your bank statements or your bank fees automatically, showing obviously amounts that are spent and amounts that are received on here, right? Pretty straightforward. But the amazing thing is, in terms of the processing, what happens is that Xero does a match to transactions that you might have already raised within the system itself. So in this case, I'm just going to focus on the expense as opposed to the income, because it's obviously not a donation. It's an invoice that this company would have issued out. But in this instance, for instance, what would have happened here is that this supplier invoice would have been brought in and raised as a creditor within Xero itself, whether it was via HubDocs or done it manually, but the invoice is raised on here. What would happen is, as soon as the payment is made, Xero does a search against the invoices or the supplier invoices and suggests a match to you on here, right? You can either do your processing from the screen. So if you say that, yes, it does relate, that payment does relate to that supplier invoice, you click OK, and the transaction is reconciled, right? Likewise, with your bank fees, these are obviously the bank rules that have been set up already. It's identified it, and it's asked you, whether you need to match that. All you do is hit OK, and those transactions are reconciled as well, right? If for whatever reason, as you can see, there might be certain transactions where Xero hasn't identified it. So all you need to do is you go in and you try and search for it if you've raised the invoice. And as you can see on something like this, for Smart Agency, you can either search in here for Smart, and it will pick up all the Smart Agency transactions. So as you can see, Xero didn't pick up and match the payment because the invoice relating to that payment that was issued by the supplier was split. There was two invoices that the supplier paid or issued to the organization. So all you do is there, you select and say, yeah, it does relate to those same two transactions, totaling 4,500 Rand, and boom, okay, those transactions are reconciled. Now, this is the most inefficient way of doing it on Xero, which is still pretty efficient. However, you could actually do your processing ideally, and this is where we should be obviously aiming to actually get our processing done. So if you can see on here, there's one button called Save and Reconcile, right? So ideally, if your bank rules have all been set up already, right? And your supply invoices have been brought in automatically. Once you've got to that point, like you're seeing on the office expenses here and on the VAT, well, they obviously call it tax. It's a global demo, so it's not unique to South Africa, and the rate is 8.25%, so that's why you're not seeing the 15% on there. Ideally, each one of these transactions on here, right from the 2nd of August to the 12th of August, should have a description, account, and obviously the VAT on there showing. If it is, and if you've set it up properly to do so, your processing can be done with a click of a button just by hitting on save and reconcile for that month. Now imagine this compared to manually capturing bank statements of a PDF, where you've got errors that sometimes happen because of the volume of transactions. And even when you do have errors and you've already reconciled it with the current systems that we use, we're going to have to process a journal entry to reverse any errors that we then identify that needs to be obviously resolved. With this, you don't even need to process a journal entry to correct any transactions. It's pretty straightforward. You can always go in. If you've allocated that correctly, you click on the specific transaction and you remove and redo, and it then takes those transactions back to your reconciliation page where you can then go in and reconcile it correctly. So it just makes things so much easier, and that's where the efficiencies comes in. Now, if you can move away from obviously data capturing and free up your task, and we do know even the accountants or the finance managers or the treasurers involved in non-profit organizations, generally you're wearing multiple caps. You're not only responsible for managing the accounting or the PAYE. You're generally dealing with fundraisers, you're dealing with staff, you're dealing with HR. There's various issues. It's a fundraising campaign that's on the go. You need to get involved in it as well. So if we can free up our time and our resources by actually automating our processing, then obviously we'll see value in that to our organizations as well, right? In terms of thereafter, in terms of, let's just say your creditors, for instance, as I mentioned earlier on, when you use HubDocs and these transactions get processed as creditors, what would then happen is you'd find this reflecting on here as awaiting payment. So even when you need to make your payments to your suppliers, there are certain additional functionalities that are available where you can make batch payments directly from here as well. As opposed to having to load these payments, individually into the organization's bank accounts for online banking and things like that. So it makes it a lot easier to be able to actually even facilitate your payments, right? The one other thing that I just want to quickly go through, how are we doing for time? Let's just see. Okay, so I just want to go through the expense claims quickly. This is the one that I mentioned earlier on, where you've got an app where staff that are traveling, for instance, can submit their claims via the app itself, which then gets brought in. Once it gets brought into Xero, this is where you actually are seeing this, right? As you can see on here, what happens is that it reflects, okay, there's a travel claim by a staff member. So the individuals that's approving it, they can go on here. If they drill down to the transaction, obviously because this is a demo, you're not seeing anything on here, but if I wanted to put on my toll slip as well, I could have uploaded this on here via the app. We hit approve and it's done, right? So what happens is that you can then see thereafter exactly what reimbursed payments need to be made as well from here. So if someone traveled and they've incurred the cost of the plane ticket, they submit the claim on here as well, and you make the payment, to them based on this. So it takes away the manual processing of the claims process, as well as even petty cash as well. So even if the organization has petty cash, as I mentioned earlier on, if you've got sites where you've got staff using cash, purchasing food or whatever the case might be, you can use this functionality for that as well. Okay. So yeah, so this obviously is just meant to be a quick look at obviously Xero itself. There's various different reports that are available to you as well, again, which you can tailor according to your needs. And one other thing, and the other, and which we've utilized as well quite effectively, is the fixed assets module. It's not a separate module that has to be added on. It's part of Xero itself, where even your depreciation calculation, is done automatically. You no longer have to maintain a separate fixed asset register itself. All your fixed assets can be actually brought into Xero itself. Once it's set up in terms of the depreciation applicable to that specific asset category, all you then need to do is obviously bring in those items and you run your depreciation. Within a click of a button, the depreciation and accumulated depreciation entries are done for you as well. So you no longer have to go and process a journal entry for depreciation, right? So that's Xero in a snapshot. As I mentioned, guys, this is a very quick snapshot of the functionality. It goes way more than that. I rest assured, there's much more to a software or a solution such as this than what we've just covered on here. The great thing about it is that there's always improvements being introduced. So they're not standing still. It's something that's always moving in terms of the improvements as well. And it is a global community. So that's basically the cloud accounting functionality. Before we move ahead, I'm not sure if there's any questions at this stage, perhaps, that anybody has. Or is everybody keeping the questions for the end, I would hope. Or I hope the guys are still on me. Or am I boring you to death? At least someone give me a thumbs up and say, guys, we all good, we can move ahead. Okay, the next tool that we just want to cover is something that we've implemented for the past, I think, 1.5 to 2 years at our firm. It's a project management tool called Asana. In fact, a very good colleague within the nonprofit sector, in fact, interestingly, actually put us onto this solution. And I'm still very much also old school in terms of, I've got my diary that stays with me. I still prefer writing down my to-do list for the day and ticking it off as we go along. It's obviously a habit that I developed from articles, and I'd never start off my day without having that with me. However, having said that, we've obviously embraced technology at the same time in terms of a tool such as this. What it actually allows you to do is obviously, again, a cloud-based solution. It actually allows collaboration in terms of teams working remotely, and we no longer work in silos. Everybody works together. You collaborate and things like that. The problem with email communication and things like that is that generally it's limited to a few individuals, or you might CC someone in there. And then once the email is sent, for someone to go and pick up on that email and search for it, and even if there was a task that was communicated to the individual via email, it can get lost somewhere along the line. With a solution such as this, basically what it allows you to do is it allows you to create multiple teams, right? So if you've got a fundraising campaign that needs to be done, for instance, you can create a specific team with those individuals that are only responsible for that fundraising campaign, for instance, right? And then what happens thereafter is that the tasks along with deadlines can then be allocated to those specific individuals. The great thing is that everybody within that team has access to see what's going on and who's responsible for which aspect of the campaign itself, right? The good thing is that you as an individual can tailor the views that suit your requirements. So if you prefer a list view or a calendar view as well, you can change it accordingly to your needs and your requirements, right? So that's the advantage, is that it's quite interchangeable. If you've got multiple teams working on multiple projects as well, you'd have that view available to you as long as you're part of that team also. The good thing is that on a daily basis, you get an automated email with your tasks due for that day. You can then obviously go on and shift around your tasks depending on obviously priority, depending on obviously your work schedule accordingly as well, and obviously taking into account the deadlines and things like that. But what it does do, it allows you to plan. It allows you to plan in advance. So what you would find is that on your My Task view, for instance, you'd have tasks due today, you'd have tasks that are perhaps due tomorrow, and then your tasks that are upcoming. And even then, you don't have to manually do it. You can actually set up rules on here where, depending on the date that a task is due, it would fall into those relevant categories, which you can then manage thereafter and prioritize and plan your tasks. The good thing about it is that you can even download some of these reports into Excel as well. So you can then obviously share that information with someone outside of that specific team if need be. So the great thing, as I mentioned, is that it can be tailored according to your needs, and it all contributes to obviously being able to collaborate as opposed to merely just communicating with one another as well. So it serves as a work planner and a to-do list as well, together with daily reminders. As I mentioned, there's a free package available, obviously depending on the size of the organization as well. But even with Asana, they do have a paid package for NPOs as well, and it's on a month-to-month basis, right? So yeah, as I mentioned, it obviously allows for better project management and collaboration across the entire organization. Everybody can work better in one shared space because you can even share information on here. You can even share your attachments, for instance, as well, if need be, right? Just to, as a further reminder, you allocate tasks and schedule deadlines. And remember, you can allocate tasks to another individual as well. It's not only allocating tasks or putting in your to-do list, on there. It can be anybody. It can be someone that's senior to you, or even a junior staff member as well. There's no restriction in terms of that, right? So that's obviously a project management tool, which we feel it really contributes to obviously the overall collaboration, in terms of obviously achieving goals and setting objectives and things like that. The other tool that we've obviously implemented is Microsoft Teams. I'm not sure how many of you might be using Microsoft Teams, but again, it all then contributes to a collaboration as well. If you ask me, we've gone from messengers on horseback to obviously writing letters to one another and sending it to the post, to even obviously sending faxes, to now email. But I think there will come a time when even emails will become redundant, undoubtedly so. The reason why I say that is that because generally emails are one-to-one communication, and it's obviously a lot more formal, which there's nothing wrong with that, obviously. But I think with a platform like Microsoft Teams, and especially in terms of how the world has changed, in the past 1.5 years with people working remotely and things like that as well, it's basically email, Zoom, Skype, WhatsApp messages, all rolled into one. It's all in one space. So you can obviously meet, you can have video calls on here, you can have chats, one-to-one chats or group chats as well. And you can then have communication in terms of work projects all in one platform, right? Rest assured, on my side, it's really changed the way I've worked and how I actually even review work as well. Our internal communication, our preferred internal communication as a firm within staff members and within ourselves, is obviously done via Microsoft Teams currently. Again, even with this, there are other platforms. I know a lot of other firms use a tool called Slack, S-L-A-C-K, I think that's what it's called. Apparently that's quite good as well, so you might want to check that out. But the advantage and the reason why we've gone with obviously Microsoft Teams is because we still use tools like Excel and Word and things like that as well. So it just makes it a lot easier, right? Just some of the functionality in terms of Microsoft Teams itself is that, as I mentioned, obviously you can chat, call, meet, and collaborate quite easily. Again, you are able to obviously set up specific teams, for instance, specific projects as well within those teams. So you can have a specific team where only certain individuals are part of, or you can even have a general team where every single person within the organization is part of that team as well. So I think that's the advantage. It's got that flexibility. Sharing documents, photos, the chat history, all of it are available on there. So even to find something, you no longer have to go through and search for an email with that information or with an attachment that was forwarded to you last week, Monday, which you may have missed. It's all on here. Similar to like saving documents on Windows Explorer, you can have your files with folders and all of those things where information can be saved, and easily accessible. For me, this is actually the great part about it, is that you can actually edit and review Word documents, Microsoft Excel, and PowerPoint slides on the platform itself. The advantage with doing it this way is that it is saved on the cloud, so it's not lost. The version that you're working with is obviously the final version. So it's not that, okay, you've done the change and you now need to then go and attach it to an email, send that email off. The next person who receives that email then needs to obviously go in, save the attachment on their side, start working on it, and then send it back to you. no longer that way. What happens here is the document is saved on here. Person can share a link. You click on the link, it takes you directly into the actual document itself. You can review, make your changes, and even if you want to, you can actually have a chat with the person specifically relating to that document as you're reviewing it as well in real time. Once it's saved, it's on there, and the person has access to it instantaneously. So for me, this has been great in terms of obviously us as accountants. You review multiple Excel schedules and things like that as well. Even with this, again, like with so many other cloud-based solutions, you've got easy integration with third-party apps as well. You've got various apps that you can integrate with. Asana does integrate with Microsoft Teams, for instance. So if you've got a project that's within Teams, like for instance, in terms of how we work, we prefer Asana to merely be a task project management platform. So we don't share attachments on that platform. That's our preference. All communication thereafter happens in Microsoft Teams, and all sharing of documents happens in Microsoft Teams. But I can integrate my Microsoft Teams to Asana, and my tools, my task gets pulled into Microsoft Teams, so you can see it all happening from here, and you can even create tasks directly in Microsoft Teams, which then updates on Asana as well, right? So that again, great functionality in terms of being able to, collaborate and integrate with various third-party applications as well. Okay, I'm not sure how many of you would be familiar with this. Obviously, this is a fax machine, which up until pretty recently, SARS was still using, by the way. But I think most people have, have passed this a long time ago. I know when I was in articles, we used to actually send bank confirmations and debtors confirmations, those of you that have an audit background, via fax, and you'd have to stand at the fax machine and wait for that slip to come through with the okay to make sure that you've actually, the recipient has got the fax on their side. But even on their side, there's no guarantee that the individual that you were hoping had received that fax actually received it. So then we moved on to fax to email, which then allowed us to receive faxes to emails. But I don't think anybody actually uses that any longer. And as I mentioned earlier on, I think if we don't adapt and thrive, then we all end up like the fax machine becoming redundant. So it is quite critical that we actually then embrace change and utilize these tools that are available to us to obviously then work smartly, work more efficiently and effectively, and obviously making use of our time as well. Okay, I'm quite sure that the next slide will probably be something that most of you will be quite excited about, as it is something that we as a firm, are extremely excited about. This is an initiative of Turning Point. We know fundraising is always an issue for nonprofit organizations, right? It's always a challenge, ensuring that you've got sufficient funding, writing proposals to donors and things like that. It's very few organizations can say without doubt that they actually have that one under control. But even when it comes to fundraising, we haven't changed the way we actually fundraise. It's done in the same way like it's been done for many, many years. Most nonprofit organizations are still to actually use technology to fundraise. We've actually developed an app called 10 Bucks Only, which actually allows fundraising or donating via a mobile app, right? Now you might say to me, okay, but our organization has an app set up, or we've actually used Zapper, for instance, or something of that sort. The difference being is that with something like this, you're actually able to generate income or showcase your organization's services or the activities that you undertake via a mobile app, right? Which is a first of its kind in South Africa. I'm just going to play a short video in terms of the concept itself.
Imagine a world where you could make donations with just a few taps on your smartphone. By seamlessly identifying your nonprofit organization of choice based on your personal preferences, using a highly secure online environment with zero commission fees, ensuring 100% of your donations go directly to the organization. With Section 18A, receipts automatically generated for you and available at your convenience. And all with a few taps of your smartphone. Wouldn't the world be a better place? Now it can be. Launching soon.
Okay, guys, so that's basically the concept of $10 only. Sorry.
Sorry. Okay, yeah. So in terms of the concept itself, hopefully you would have gauged from the actual video that what it does is that obviously it's using the power of technology in terms of moving, the ability to donate to a cell phone within a few taps of a cell phone. How it actually works, so the concept itself in terms of $10 only is that, I remember growing up, my grand used to actually have a bottle where they used to be putting in coins. And I always wondered what on earth was going on with that. And then once a year that would be opened up and they'd go out and actually maybe, feed or get sandwiches and distribute or something like that. And obviously, even if you think about it, the concept of those donation tins at the supermarkets as well. It's the power of obviously the masses in terms of, yes, whilst it might be small amounts, but if we can tap into those small amounts, then we're not only relying on high net worth individuals to donate. So that's where the concept and the charm of $10 only. It's a small amount, but if we can get people contributing to our organizations, $10 at a time on a weekly basis, for instance, but as long as they commit to it and do it frequently and regularly and making donating habitual, the only way we can do that is to make it as easy and as seamless as possible for an organization to do so. Now, today we use our cell phones for everything. We obviously do online banking with our cell phones. We shop on Take a Lot. We order a ride, we order food by Uber Eats as well, just with a few taps of our cell phones. But when it comes to donating, it's a lot more difficult. If I want to actually donate to a nonprofit organization, I actually need to perhaps have a relationship with that organization in some way or the other, or know an individual, whereby I then obviously go in and maybe chat to them, get their banking details, go in and do an EFT, and obviously then chase them up for an 18A certificate thereafter. That's currently how it's done. Or I go onto their website, find their banking details, and then go in and do the same. But still, there's still a manual process to it. Most organizations haven't gone on completely online in terms of being able to generate donations, right? So that's one aspect, is that it just allows donations to be made much easier. The other advantage is that as a non-profit organization, right, whilst yes, we might have a social media presence or we might have a website, that sort of thing, but not many of us have a platform where we can showcase ourselves. So if you think about Take a Lot, right, Take a Lot's actually, they don't necessarily own the goods that they sell. They actually a platform, or window into an online shop. That's essentially what they are. So you get various suppliers that list their products on Take a Lot. Likewise, in terms of the app itself, as a non-profit organization, you'd be able to showcase your activities on that platform. So what would happen is you'll have access to your back end, where you can then actually upload information about your organization, about your activities, upload photographs, having your social media links and things like that. And what it would then do is that if, for instance, you're an organization that's involved in education, if a donor is specifically interested in donating to an educational organization in Cape Town, for instance, goes in, searches education, And obviously geographical location, he can go into Cape Town. It'll come up with all the organizations that are involved in education based in Cape Town. Thereafter, if he obviously browses through and he's happy with what he sees in terms of what your organization does, is that within a few taps, he can then make a donation, obviously a minimum amount of $10, as we said, but there's no limit in terms of how much he wants to then donate. He hits donate now, and via instant EFT, so we've got Ozo as the instant EFT partner, he makes a donation directly to the organization, not via any third-party application. I think that's the advantage, is that it goes directly to the organization via instant EFT. There is no commission charged on that donation, so the full rand goes to the organization. The great thing about this is that, again, when it comes to automation, and as you can see, this is what we're big on, the actual 18A receipting process is entirely automated. I'm quite certain that most of you out here today who are 18A organizations probably have an Excel template or Word document, which you might be obviously using, and you then have to manually input the donor's details every time you need to issue out that 18A certificates. Now, when it comes to the provisional tax returns, perhaps, or if the donor is submitting the income tax return for the 2021 tax year in November 2021, and he's looking at an 18A receipt that he might have, or 18A donation that he might have made in March 2020, now he's lost that receipt. So he's probably going to come down to you and request that receipt, and for you to actually then be able to access it becomes a bit of a challenge. You need to go on and search for that receipt and provide it to him, because you want to make sure that you're keeping your donors happy. With something like this, as soon as the donation is made, the donor is able to instantaneously initiate the downloading of that 18A certificate on his side. It can be stored on the app itself, and he can email it to himself. If for whatever reason he loses it somewhere along the line, he doesn't have it saved on email, he can go back into the app if he needs it 1 year later and search for that 18A receipt as well. You, as the nonprofit organization, in order to obviously submit that information to SARS, you'd be able to have access to that information at the back end of the system as well, right? So obviously, in terms of the concept itself, you're now being able to showcase your activities to thousands of donors across the country. That we obviously will be once we go live with launching the actual app itself, right? It obviously increases your NPO donor base and the donations to your organization itself, and the fact that it's both mobile and web-based. So even if that donor is not too comfortable using a mobile app, there is actually a web-based solution where he can go online and make that donation directly to your organization, right? As I mentioned, fully automated Section 18A receipts available both on the app as well on the web platform for your organization itself. So yeah, that's, I think, the last of the tech solutions that we wanted to cover today. I think we're on time for, yep, I think we're good on time. We can perhaps field the questions at the end. Before we wrap up, just a little bit of, in terms of some of our tailored solutions that we offer to nonprofit organizations. As I mentioned earlier on, we are a firm of chartered accountants that specialize in the nonprofit sector. Having said that, we obviously offer a full range of services, right from registering a nonprofit organization, whether it's a nonprofit trust, whether it's a voluntary association or an NPC, undertaking the registrations, whether it's your Section 18A PBO registration with SARS, or even advising you on multiple structures within which to operate your nonprofit organization as well. We handle all of that. We've got a completely fixed fee, outsourced accounting and payroll solution that we offer to nonprofit organizations, where we handle all of the accounting, compliance, payroll, tax submissions as well, DST submissions to SARS and obviously Department of Social Development, on a month-to-month basis, and it's part of a CA Connect package, which will be, we'll provide you with a bit more information on that as well. We obviously, being USAID accredited, we undertake both your statutory and fund audits for nonprofit organizations as well. That division is headed up by Farida. And then I think, in terms of some of the other unique services and solutions that we offer to nonprofit organizations, where we undertake VAT reviews for organizations, it is an area that causes quite a bit of confusion to nonprofit organizations. So we obviously assist in that regard. We've also got something called a free NPO needs analysis, which is essentially a no obligation, no cost analysis, or if I could call it a health check of your nonprofit organizations, addressing basically compliance and tax risks that might be facing your organization as well. So yeah, that's basically us, in a nutshell. I think we can now open up the floor to any questions and comments that might have come through. So I'm happy to proceed with that. Okay, guys, anybody with any questions? At this stage, I just want to see whether we've got any questions that have come through. Okay. Okay, I think someone wanted to have a look at Asana at a high level. I'm not sure whether I would have covered it or they perhaps wanted it to be in terms of a demo itself. And I don't know whether you could just clarify that for me. There was a request for Asana to be covered at high levels. I don't know whether it has been covered or not. Okay, so it seems like we have covered that. Okay, then we've got a question that came through regarding travel, staff travel, right? So there's obviously a significant amount incurred by staff, whether they are a recommendation for tools that track travel trips that can automatically generate travel claims with GPS tracking. Okay, not an area of expertise for me, to be honest, in terms of the GPS tracking itself. So I wouldn't be able to advise you on that, unfortunately. Just in terms of the claims itself, I know Zero Expenses does allow for it. I can double check whether it does then allow you to actually use a GPS navigation to actually track the mileage itself. Yes, then we've got a question as to whether Zero offers a plan and discounted rates for non-profit organizations. Yes, that is correct. If you are a registered non-profit organization, you would qualify for a 25% discount on the Zero packages that are available. Okay, and then there was a question with regard to the fixed assets module of I'm not sure the nature of that actual question. I'm not picking it up. I don't know if you want to maybe clarify the question with regard to the fixed asset module on Zero. I think Farida might have responded to it, but I'm not sure whether the question has been answered entirely. Farida, do you want to perhaps clarify that for me in terms of the fixed assets?
Yes, Riza, I think the query was whether there's any fixed asset tracking modules available. What I did reply on the chat was that Zero does have a fixed asset module. It allows you to capture all your assets in, but there's no specific space for location, but there is a description block in there which you could possibly use. So I'm not too sure if that addresses their query, but I did post that on the chat area.
I'm with you on that one. Okay, let's just see. Let's go through the chat quickly and see if we've missed anything else. Guys, you're most welcome to unmute yourself. And if we haven't obviously addressed questions, because I see it's hard to follow everything on the chat itself. So you're most welcome to unmute yourself and ask the questions to us directly. Okay, is Approval Max the best tool for purchase order approvals? Okay, we haven't used Approval Max, Lisa, so I'm not too sure about it, but I've heard good stuff about it though. So we haven't had first-hand experience on it, but I have had about it, and I think it does integrate with Zero as well. Okay, I think someone wanted a quick 5-minute summary of obviously what we covered in today's session. So perhaps what we will do is I'll just go back to the tech stack. Maybe that would probably be the best option. Yep. Okay, so obviously, cloud technology, they bring significant benefits to organizations, in terms of enabling us to obviously make effective use of our time and resources. I think, as we said, that's quite critical. And the way to do that is obviously to embrace technology and collaborate. There's various platforms that are available, various solutions that are available. We've obviously covered some of the accounting solution rather that we work on, which is Xero. It's a fantastic product. Obviously, it's a global solution as well. So you're obviously using global best practice. Tied in with that, there's various other functionalities like data extraction, utilizing a tool that's such as HubDocs, where it would obviously extract data from third-party suppliers as well. And that's just one of the tools that are available, that integrates with Xero. There's over 800 apps that you can actually then integrate with a product like Xero, right? Obviously, in terms of the accounting process itself, it's critical that we move away from capturing bank statements, in a PDF format, but rather actually automate that entire process by using automatic bank feeds as well, which again saves a significant amount of time. We've obviously touched on project management tools. The one that we use is a tool such as Asana, which obviously enables us to obviously allocate tasks, prioritize tasks with due dates, and just work much better, much more efficiently and effectively as well, achieve our goals and deadlines, prioritize and share information with our team members via a platform like Microsoft Teams, as opposed to where we just limit it to email, because it's always there, it's easily accessible. Even if individuals are working live on a specific document, for instance, you no longer need to wait for an update for that individual. You can go in on there while someone is working on it and have a look and see the progress that the person has made, perhaps whether it's on a presentation or whatever the case might be. There's obviously CRM tools. We haven't covered anything specific from, in terms of donor data, donor management tools, but there definitely are some out there as well. But some of the CRM tools, or the reputable ones, would be HubSpot and Zoho, which go beyond just CRM. That's the thing, it goes there's so much more functionality to some of these tools as well. Some of the marketing platforms or marketing tools that are available to you in terms of designing of brochures, logos, Instagram posts and things like that. You've got a tool such as Canva. And then in terms of freelancing, we've also got, as I mentioned, Fiverr, Fiverr, where you've got access to global freelancers and experts on various things, from voiceovers to design and things like that, at reasonable rates. And then we touched on an HR tool where you can actually do interviews remotely via video upload, something called Wamly. I hope I've summarized it as best as I can, but we will obviously share the presentation as well. And I see that there is another question that has come through. Is it possible to capture expenses and income for different projects on a single subscription? So for example, Xero. So I'm assuming that you incur costs and want to split that to specific projects. You might have multiple projects. So you might have, for instance, rental, and you might want to split that to 2 different projects. Yes, you would be able to do that on a single subscription for Xero, or on Xero rather. Okay, guys, before we start wrapping up, we've obviously got a few more sessions coming up in terms of, I think next week, we've got accounting and compliance that is scheduled, dealing with obviously, some of the accounting challenges that nonprofit organizations face in terms of specific transactions, the general compliance issues, whether it's DST, workman's compensation, obviously all the tax compliance that nonprofit organizations need to adhere to as well. We'll deal with audit best practice, and then some basic e-filing navigation, for instance, tax compliance, accessing VAT refund dashboards on their VAT state or VAT PAYE statements of accounts as well. And then thereafter, I think the last 3 sessions would be specifically where we start unpacking the tax benefits available to nonprofit organizations in terms of trading income and income tax exemption, the income tax thresholds as well, together with obviously thereafter, the myths around VAT and how it applies to nonprofit organizations. Then we end up with our last session with 18A and other tax benefits as well. So yeah, thank you very much, for giving us the opportunity, on this platform. We hope that you have found this to be valuable. We normally actually have, full day sessions or 2-day sessions on some of the subject matter. So time is a bit of an issue on an online platform like this. It's not ideal to obviously be, disseminating information, like a one-way street. We always prefer doing it in a way it's a lot more interactive, but hopefully in time, we would be able to do that. And yeah, don't know if there's any other questions. Can we please arrange Zero training? Okay. Okay, I think the guys that need more information on Zero, my email address is on here. You're most welcome to actually pop me an email, and then we can take that discussion forward separately, and we can set up a date and time for that. Okay, just on one thing, I know Farida has covered it. The billings on Zero are currently US dollars per month. Starting, I think the basic package is about $20 per month. And remember, you don't pay per user. However, I was on an update with them the day before yesterday on the virtual roadshow, and they will now be moving to Rand billing pretty soon. So that's a good thing for South Africans. It's not going to be pegged to the dollar amounts, right? How long before $10 becomes available? It is currently has been approved by the Google Play Store. We are waiting on approval from Apple themselves, having a bit of a challenge on that. And obviously with COVID and the challenges that we've had some challenges, but we are actually piloting it with clients in the interim. So our the non-profit clients that we have been testing already, making sure that obviously all the teething issues and things like that are resolved before we go live. So if you do want to actually get further information on that, please, you are most welcome to subscribe to our mailing list. Pop me an email as well, and we'll be able to add you on there. Okay, and then someone had a question with regard to integrating $10 into the back end. Yes, we will be able to eventually assist in that regard as well, where we'd be able to obviously then have it linked to your website. We'll have we'll obviously then share a welcome package with you, where you'd obviously have links on your email footers, for instance, as well, which will allow you to then obviously send it out to your donors as well. Does $10 only allow for 10 Rand donations? 10 Rand is the minimum amount, but there's no limit in terms of how much a donor can contribute towards your organization. Okay. Questions? Okay, that's it. I think we've covered all the questions. So thank you very much for your time, guys. Please, be safe, take care of yourself, and we hope to see you soon. The next session is obviously on the 1st of September, dealing with accounting and statutory compliance for NPOs. And we look forward to connecting with you then. Take care. Cheers. Bye.